Every NFL season, unfortunately, always comes with a bunch of different injuries. Now, fortunately, usually those guys do come back from those injuries and end up playing just as well as they did before. So today, I want to talk about the 5 NFL players who had injuries last year, who I expect to have big impacts in 2024. So real quick before I get to my top 5, I did want to hand out 2 honorable mentions, those names being Nick Chubb for the Cleveland Browns and Christian Gonzalez for the New England Patriots. Both of these guys have kind of unique stories. Nick Chubb being a little bit older. We'll see if he comes back from that injury playing at the same level that he was. Christian Gonzalez is a rookie and plays, of course, cornerback, so I don't want to include him in this video in comparison to some of these other guys who I think are going to have major impacts on their respective teams. But let's hop into the list. Starting off at number 5, we are going to be talking about Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts. And unfortunately for Anthony Richardson, his rookie season was cut off really short after what was really looking like an impressive start to his year. And even though he is a rookie quarterback and the expectations for him aren't necessarily too high, my personal opinion on Anthony Richardson is that I do have very high expectations. Because in that short amount of time that we did see Anthony Richardson play football, I thought he looked like the second best quarterback in last year's rookie class. And that was only behind his AFC South running mate in CJ Stroud. And that made me very excited to see what he was going to do for the rest of last year. Unfortunately, the injury did happen and Gardner Minshew came in and played pretty well. But now it looks like Anthony Richardson is lined up to be the week 1 starter. And one of my biggest storylines heading into 2024 is going to be the Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud build up to what is going to be an insane rivalry for hopefully the next 10 years. I truly do believe that because we have these 2 young stud rookie quarterbacks who had impressive first years and now going into their sophomore seasons, that we can see these guys take another step forward in their careers and see these guys duke it out for the next 10 to 15 years. I don't want to compare these guys to like Brady or Manning, but kind of think of it as like a what that could be or what that could look like. We have Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. Now we have CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson, a dynamic duo of quarterbacks who are going to be playing each other a hell of a lot over the next couple years. And for Anthony Richardson, fortunately for him, the roster that the Indianapolis Colts have built has become one of the better rosters in the NFL. And I truly do believe that if he comes back from this injury 100%, he's going to be leading an offense that should be top 10 in the NFL. Shane Steichen is one of the best offensive minds in the league, and you're surrounding him with a very good offensive line, some very good wide receivers, and of course Jonathan Taylor. It really does not get a whole much more better than that. Next up at number 4, we are going to be talking about Kirk Cousins of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, prior to his 2023 injury coming to a close, Kirk Cousins was playing like arguably an MVP level quarterback. Now hear me out, that might sound a little bit crazy, but just hear these stats through 8 games of last year. Through the 8 games, which by the way does include the game that he did get injured in, which he did not play the full game for, regardless of that though, he had a completion percentage of 69.5%, 2,331 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Now, I understand that Minnesota Vikings team was not winning a ton of games, but to be honest with you, that really was not Kirk Cousins' fault. The defense was building to what it could have been, and the offense had a lot of issues. With that being said, Kirk Cousins was definitely not one of the issues on that team last year. Now he is heading to the Atlanta Falcons, who have arguably a better team surrounding him. I won't say it's better quite yet, but it's definitely an arguable statement. You look at the offensive line, you look at the receiving weapons, Bijan Robinson behind him, and maybe a better defense than Minnesota. All in all, that is an Atlanta Falcons team that is full of talent, and it is surrounding Kirk Cousins with a lot of really good pieces for him to be surrounded by. My personal expectations for Kirk Cousins is that I think he will struggle a little bit early on, as he is of course coming off a pretty significant injury. And I do expect the offense to take a little bit of time to get adjusted to Kirk Cousins' playing style and of course the play style of every single player that surrounds Kirk Cousins. This is not a situation where he comes off this major injury and just goes right back to Kevin O'Connell's system and just throws it up to Justin Jefferson every single play. Now he has to learn a new system and now he has to learn his new receivers. So I do personally think that it's going to take maybe a couple weeks for it to pick up, but I think as the season progresses, I think you're going to see Kirk Cousins take that big step forward and maybe put himself in a position where he might be considered a top 10 quarterback. Again, he's coming off a significant injury. Obviously, anytime you have a torn Achilles, that is a major injury, especially for a quarterback who's not a spring chicken anymore, so we'll have to keep an eye out on Kirk Cousins and see how he plays at the end of the season. Next up at number 3, we're going to be discussing Trevon Diggs of the Dallas Cowboys, one of, if not the most underrated cornerbacks in the NFL, and no, that is not my personal bias sneaking through here. Trevon Diggs is a highly scrutinized player for, in my opinion, no reason. One of the biggest complaints that people often have with Trevon Diggs is that he gives up a bunch of passing yards, and while that may have been true for his freshman and sophomore years in the NFL, I thought last year and I think in 2022, he was playing some of the best football of his career. Obviously, Trevon Diggs is known for being a interception merchant, somebody who can give you a ton of turnovers and can completely flip the script of a game, which in my opinion is super important for a team, especially like the Dallas Cowboys, who rely on these turnovers to create an awesome defense. Now, I do have some general concerns of how Trevon Diggs is going to come back from, of course, his injury, but primarily, how is he going to be looking in this new system that is not really allocated and built around turnovers? That was sort of the big thing about Dan Quinn's system. He was okay with giving up a bunch of yards if it meant that you're going to get 4 turnovers in a game, or if it meant you're going to get 5 to 6 sacks in a game. Now you're under Mike Zimmer, who, of course, is going to tell these guys to get the interceptions when it's available for them, but I don't know really if he's going to be teaching them to be as aggressive. Now, yes, the secondary coach is still there, and Al Harris, who, in my opinion, will be a defensive coordinator one day. But I do wonder if maybe Zimmer's going to try to tone that down a little bit so that we don't give up so much yards and focus a bit more on just playing solid coverage. But in my opinion, a combination of Trevon Diggs and DaRon Bland is extremely appetizing for me. Unfortunately, Stephon Gilmore likely won't be a Dallas Cowboy next year, which does definitely suck. But they do have an overall really solid secondary with Malik Hooker as your primary free safety, Trevon Diggs as your cornerback 1, DaRon Bland at cornerback 2, and your slot corner more than likely being Jordan Lewis. Trevon Diggs is the best of all those names I just listed, and if he can come off this injury playing like the guy that we know him to be, we're talking about potentially a top 10 cornerback in the NFL. His impact was felt tremendously throughout this Dallas Cowboys defense, whose secondary wasn't really the issue on this team. It wasn't more to deal with the linebacking core and the inability to stuff the run, but obviously having a playmaker like Trevon Diggs next to Bland and Gilmore would have made that defense even more deadly. Next up at number 2, we're going to be talking about Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, Joe Burrow had a very bizarre 2023 season. He was dealing with injuries throughout the year, continued to play on the injuries despite a lot of people wanting him not to play through them, but at the end of the year, he would suffer a major wrist injury, which would cause him to lose out for the rest of the 2023 season. It was a bizarre year in terms of his production as well. A lot of it, in my opinion, was due to the fact that he had a ton of injuries he was going through, but even when he was playing on the field, it wasn't like he was playing some fantastic football. But I do personally believe that if he can come back into this upcoming season 100% healthy, which it does look like the Cincinnati Bengals are trying to do, if he can get back to that level, we're talking about a top 5 quarterback. Recently, I've been seeing a lot of different discussions about who's a top 5 quarterback and who isn't, and oftentimes we see a lot of people say that Joe Burrow is no longer a top 5 quarterback, and to me, I can definitely see the argument, but I personally don't agree with it. I personally do believe that a healthy Joe Burrow is up there with the likes of the Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, the Matthew Staffords of the world. And even though I would likely never compare Joe Burrow to Patrick Mahomes at a very serious level, I still think they're on some comparable level in a small sense. Fortunately for Joe Burrow, given the fact that he has missed some time, the offensive line has gotten a lot better around him, going out there and getting guys like Trent Brown, bringing in Amarius Mims. Of course, you have Orlando Brown on the other side, and your offensive line in general should be better for next year. You also brought in Zach Moss to be your new running back, which I personally do think is a small upgrade over Joe Mixon. I do think that he presents a different style of running back that's going to benefit this Bengals team a little bit more. And of course, your wide receiver core is still going to be stout with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Hopefully those guys can, one, stay healthy, but also get paid someday. And I also think that that's going to be a pretty solid defense all around. I do think the Cincinnati Bengals are primed for a really big season next year. Are they going to be Super Bowl favorites at any point? Maybe not, but if they can make that playoff run, wouldn't be shocked if they went out there and won a Super Bowl. But at number 1, we're going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers. Now, me personally, I don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a better player next year than Joe Burrow or maybe even Kirk Cousins. But with that being said, Aaron Rodgers' presence on the football field for the New York Giants is so much more significant than just the quarterback play itself. This is a Jets franchise that has not had a franchise quarterback in, I don't know what, 20 years? The thought of it was going to be that it was going to be Sam Darnold or Zach Wilson or Mark Sanchez, and it just has never been able to work itself out. Now you actually have this proven guy who has a 15+ year career and resume to prove who he is. And in week 1 of last year's season, he goes down with a major injury, but now he's coming back in 2024 fully healthy. Now, the injury was serious. He had surgery to repair his torn Achilles, which is a major injury, especially when we're talking about a guy of the age of Aaron Rodgers. But fortunately for the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers' game is not really predicated on his overall athleticism. It's just basically all on his brain and pure arm talent. You put Aaron Rodgers in a situation where he has a solid offensive line that actually has depth for once, and it should be healthy next year, to go along with a wide receiving core that, if healthy, should look pretty good. Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Malachi Corley, a bunch of really good names there, to go along with a top 5 defense. That could be one of the best teams in the NFL. And you want to talk about a guy who can single-handedly ignite an entire fan base. You're looking at Aaron Rodgers and you're looking at what he can do for that New York Jets fan base. Again, this is a fan base that has been desperate for a franchise quarterback. Now you get your franchise quarterback fully healthy and should be primed for a big bounce back year in 2024. But if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button. There's a bunch of other players that I could do, so if you guys want to see a part 2, let me know in the comment section below and let me know some names that you guys want to hear. But again, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.